Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to day 2 of our Unstoppable Parent Programme series in Conversations With. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Heidi Maver. I'm the founder of EOTAS Matters. I'm an autistic ADHD adult living in Yorkshire in the UK. And in our work at EOTAS Matters, we support parents and carers in neurodivergent households who may have children with barriers to attendance or have children with additional needs who need support navigating the education system, primarily in England, but we are international, and our guest today is international, which we're very excited about. So as part of this series, I'm interviewing different people who I've come across in my life and work. Yesterday we chatted with Carrie and David Grant. If you didn't see that webinar live and you would like access to it, go to the link in the top of the comments here, click the link, pop in your email address, you'll get a replay out to you. It's also on my YouTube channel. But today's guest is the fabulous Munira. Munira is coming at us all the way from, you're in Canada right now, right? Is that right?
Yeah, at the moment, yeah. I kind of go between London and Canada at the moment. So I'm in Canada, but I'm often London based.
Amazing. So, and you've got someone here who knows you. Someone's been in one of your workshops.
Oh, hello.
So, Munira Adenwalla, single parent living in Canada, home ed parent, also a specialist paediatric occupational therapist, so a parent professional. And we're going to have a chat today about your setup and what it means to be an unstoppable parent for you. And you're going to share some of your lived experience and your tips. And I know that other parents will really benefit from hearing your story. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Do you want to just set us off with telling us a little bit about your home, your household, your dynamic, your family, what that looks like?
Yeah, so I've got a 12-year-old, and I guess for our home, we used to have a clinic in my house, and that was to so that I could work and parent our child at the same time. So we used to have a lot of the clinic equipment, I guess, in our house, and my son, he has grown up knowing other kids that come to clinic to see me all of his life. So he has almost had his kind of people around him by default in a way, because he's part of he's had kids like him around him all the time in that sense. And I've known since, it sounds really funny in a way, but I've known since he was born that he had sensory needs, because he was literally born like this, with his hands over his ears. That's how he came out.
Yeah.
And it's why it also took him a long time to come out, because he had his hands over his ears. And so I've known since he was born that he had sensory needs, and he had a lot of feeding difficulties as well. And we went to see I think I've gone on a tangent already, but we went to see a doctor, and because he was 4 pounds when he was born, and went to see a doctor, and they did a pull to sit test, and he whipped up into standing, and we were fast tracked right away. They thought he had cerebral palsy, and really it was his sensory needs, because he was a very alert child, and he was very tense in his body. So we were fast tracked through the NHS, which was unusual, but it was because of his weight being so small. So we had a team of 8 to 10 different professionals, and nobody believed me when I said he has sensory needs, and that his feeding difficulties were oral motor related, and he had a wobbly jaw, and he had a very cute smile, but it was a wonky smile, and he like dribbled through one side of his mouth. So I've experienced being unheard and second guessed since that was around 4 months we had that meeting.
And you were already working as an occupational therapist at that time, so
yeah,
you were a professional.
I've been in OT for 11 to 12 years at that point, working with babies with sensory needs and differences. And that was my specialty at the time, was infants and toddlers. And so I had gone through all of that, and on the reports that they would write, and the mother, who happens to be an occupational therapist, says yada yada yada, which is a way of kind of saying she's kind of making it up.
That mum says, mum reports. parents think. Like,
Yeah.
it's so frustrating, especially, I think, but it's also, I think, reassuring for other parents when they hear parent professionals share those experiences, because
Yeah.
it's us letting you know that everybody has that experience. Even people who have actual certificates to prove that they know what they're talking about
Yeah.
get told, we know best. You
Yes.
couldn't possibly know this about your own child.
Yeah, I think it's a thing with society. They kind of undermine a parent's expertise about their child, and so I actually second guessed myself all the time and thought, oh, am I reading into it? Am I seeing too much just because I've seen lots of children like this as well? Am I just seeing that with my own child? But
Yeah.
I luckily I have other friends who are occupational therapists and speech therapists and feeding therapists, and they kind of would often put me on track, and I'd talk through things with them and I'd get advice from them as well, and those are the things that would help him in terms of his feeding skills and being more comfortable in his body at that time. So I knew about, from it was a little different in that I knew since he was born, where sometimes you don't know until a bit later on, but it was because of the feeding difficulties and just how he was always crying. It was, those were his red flags as a baby.
And do you mind me asking, because your heritage, you're a brown person,
Yes.
do you think that impacted whether you were heard or taken seriously? Like, do you feel that?
Yeah. I really I don't know. At that time, it's hard to say if it was. Sometimes I feel like people meet me and they think, oh, she's Asian, she must be really smart. So sometimes I get that, but I didn't get that as being a parent.
I mean, I know you are really smart.
Yeah.
I don't want to speculate on whether that's because you're Asian or not, but I do know
Yeah.
that you're really smart. So, okay, amazing. So
Yeah.
for you, there wasn't like a realization that Mohammed was neurodivergent. You kind of knew from the beginning because you were observing those things based on your clinical expertise and your
Yeah.
professional experience.
Yeah, but the thing that did really kind of surprise us a little bit more as he grew up, and I kind of thought of it in hindsight, it all made sense. But as he grew up, it's just how self-led he was. Because that's hard to see as a baby because you have to do so much for a baby, But when I think back, even as a baby, like he never liked being put in a position. Almost, he had to get into that position himself to be comfortable. So he like crawled really well, and he would whiz down the stairs really fast, and everyone would be scared he's going to fall over and hurt himself, but he was amazing at it. He was really good at knowing his own body and what he could do, but he couldn't sit on his bottom, and sit. He couldn't sit still, so but he could crawl and do all these other things. And when he walked, it was at 16 months, but it was like he'd been walking forever almost. So it's almost like he had been practicing all these things in his mind, and when he could do it, he did it on his own.
It just was like straight from nothing to done. And
Yeah,
like didn't look like there was any process in between.
yeah, totally. And then I tried all some of the children's play groups or the things at the library, and they would do like music and songs and copying actions, and he would just be sitting on the side and be like, nope, I'm not doing that, kind of, or he did an art thing once, and they were doing a lovely heart project with heart buttons, and they'd have to follow this stencil to make a heart, and he told them he didn't want to make a heart, and they were not open to it. So he did what they said then, and then he said, yep, I'm not going back to that. So it's all those little things. It just kind of really cemented just how self-led he was. But I had to kind of step back, and because almost as society, we kind of feel like we have to teach kids things and show them how to do things sometimes, or they won't really be able to do those things maybe. But he actually it was a really good lesson for me as an occupational therapist, that kids can be really self-driven and have an inner drive to do things, and they can learn a lot of things by following their interests and their passions from the beginning. So yeah, he learned how to read and how to count. I'm convinced he learned all these things from looking at tube maps and the boards at the train stations by counting out, is this many stops to the next station. And his reading, it was like, I think he was about 5, and all of a sudden he knew how to read. And I'm like, how did you learn how to read? He just figured out how to read. He was reading books on his own. He went from not reading little books to reading books.
I think I hear this from parents all the time, right? Particularly parents who have children who are not in conventional education settings, and they're worried that their kids won't learn to read and won't learn to count. And I have a young person in my circle who has never managed school. And they are now 8, 9. And there was lots of conversations about they won't be able to learn to read. And then one day they just let us know that they could read.
Yeah.
And they'd been reading for quite some time without letting on. And then it just became clear that they can read and they can write too. And no one had ever kind of sat down. And I just, I'm not saying that there aren't, I mean, I know you do a lot of work in this area. You do a lot of work in supporting children who struggle with writing. Yeah, that's kind of one of your passions.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's just a simple case of don't worry, they'll all learn how to do it. You haven't got to think about it.
Yeah.
And children constantly surprise us with their capacity to engage in learning in non-conventional ways that get the results that they want, right? This commenter says, my child taught himself to read as he was fed up with asking what the captions were on Nintendo DS, right? Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So for you as a professional, you had been working in the field for 12 years, supporting children who had neurodivergent presentations and who had sensory differences. What was it like as a parent? Was there a shift when you were then looking at your own child? How was that for you? Was there some processing to do? Was there some thinking to do around that? What was that like?
Yeah, it was very intense. Especially with the feeding difficulties, I feel like it was really difficult and exhausting and worrying. And I got to sense what it feels like as a parent to go through those things. And I kind of recognized it from seeing so many parents do it, but living it yourself was really, really difficult and hard. And also just all the second guessing that I did on myself. And it was also really lonely as well, because it was lonely, and it also wasn't, because I had the families I worked with and I felt like I connected with those families. But then also I was the therapist, so there had to be some kind of I mean, I get close with families I work with anyways, but also I won't be going out and hanging out with them with my child and doing coffee, mum and baby kind of things. I didn't have people to do that with. We tried NCT groups and things, and I didn't. We didn't. I had a different baby. I tried some of the baby wearing groups, and my baby wear it differently than they did, kind of. And then so it was, and even the NCT groups. It's partly me as well, but also my child didn't like being in busy, loud places. And also I'm much better doing things with just a 1 or 2 people, not in big groups. So for me, the NCT groups did not work for me at all. And I think it took me years probably to find the right people. So it was once we started doing home ed groups, and we found a really lovely home ed group near us. And that's when I found our people who were like us. So it was, but before it took a long time to find that. But I had the people I worked with, it was actually, they don't even know how much of a support it was to me to just know other people like them at that time.
Yeah, so much. I really relate to the thing about the NCT. It's kind of the thing, isn't it? Because at the time you were living in the UK, right? So it's a thing that you're like, oh, and then you'll go to NCT classes or mother and baby classes or whatever it is, and that kind of that from very early. I remember going to a book club when Theo was tiny, he would have been less than 6 months, and each kind of fortnight, a different person would pick a different book, and it was my turn to pick a book, and I picked this book, and it's my favorite book of all time. It's called Perfume by by Patrick Suskind, but it's quite dark. It's about a serial killer, he's a serial killer with significant sensory differences. So I mean, I didn't know at the time, but he's an autistic serial killer basically. And the other parents in the group were absolutely horrified by my choice of book. They were all like, we're all trying to enjoy our babies and you're bringing this really dark fiction. And I was like, oh, okay. I think I'm in the wrong place. I thought you might like a little bit of a change from talking about like baby signing. I thought we could, but no. And it was really alienating for me. And I think that's something that a lot of parents of neurodivergent kids, who then find they are neurodivergent themselves, we don't necessarily fit into the regular baby group thing or the parent thing or the, we don't want to, all that stuff.
I actually thought something was like maybe wrong with me in a way, because I didn't get along in these groups, and also because so many people said that they had made all their baby friends and their mum friends with people from their NCT groups, and that it had lasted until their children were like 7-8 plus years old. And I'm like, oh, but that's not happening for me. And then also I had a pregnancy where I was sick like the whole pregnancy, and my sensory stuff really heightened hugely in my pregnancy. Right. I couldn't even tolerate the smell of people in my pregnancy, which sounds really strange. Like my mum came to help look after me because I was such a mess, and I couldn't even tolerate the smell of her as well. So it sounds really strange, but your smell is like a really primal protective sense.
My sense of smell was crazy when I was pregnant, like same as you, to the point that things made me nauseous. The smell of oranges made me nauseous, and and I didn't particularly enjoy being pregnant, which is the thing you're not allowed to say. So everyone else was like, oh, and I was like, ugh.
I didn't either. And I was a bit jealous actually of all the people, and still sometimes. I'm very happy for them, but I'm also a little bit jealous of them as well. People that have lovely bumps and stuff. I gained 16 pounds in my pregnancy because I was puking the whole time. And I never had a lovely looking bump, and I never wanted to take pictures of it and stuff because I just felt so icky in myself.
It's a massive sensory overhaul, isn't it? Carrying a baby, like being pregnant, it's a big thing for your whole body. And God.
I think when you have sensory stuff, it kind of heightens a lot in these kind of big changes. And maybe for people who have, it would be interesting to see. I don't know what it's like for others, people with sensory needs beforehand and then going through pregnancy, if it heightened to this degree or not. But mine heightened so badly during pregnancy.
Same. You're the first person I've ever heard say that. That's same. There's a really good Instagram page called Neurodivergent Birth, and they have a podcast, and they talk about birthing experiences neurodivergent people. And you're the first person that I've ever like made that connection with, and like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that. I felt like rubbish when I was pregnant. Okay.
Yeah. And I had a water birth, which was really
me too.
I think it was a lifesaver for me. I don't know what I would have done without it. That calming sensory input of the pressure in the water, and they wanted me to get out because it was like 4 hours, and Mohammed had his hand over his ears and wasn't coming out, and I'm like, I'm not coming out of here. So they let me stay for an extra hour in the water, and he finally got the message and came out. So but I think it was the sensory of the water was a lifesaver for me. I couldn't have done it on a bed or in any other positions, I don't think. So
exactly the same for me. So let's skip forward a little bit. So did Mohammed go to school and then you decided to home ed, or have you always been a home ed?
We've always home eded, and I knew when he was about 2 months old because I had someone come to see if they could help look after him while I was working, and they basically picked him up wrong and did all these things that didn't work for him. And I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. He's I kind of joked, we're going to keep him home forever, and then it actually ended up moving on to talking about home ed. And but he did go to a forest school nursery, and that only lasted a few times because it it was supposed to be the most open-ended and unstructured and playful of places, and they could not accept the way that he played, and they were like, oh, he plays a bit behind, because he was kind of playfully batting kids, and I think toddlers do that, but he was probably around 3.5 or something, and he was doing it then instead of at much younger. It wasn't a lot or anything, but they still there was a lot of things they couldn't really put together, and then they would talk about him in front of me, and then he would say, oh, am I a bad child? And then I took him out very quickly from there, and he still remembers it, that place. So that trauma for kids really in school really lingers for a long time.
Yeah.
At 3, and he's 12 now. So he's never been to school. We used to have a school behind us, and he'd always cover his ears while going by the school with the kids on at break time and stuff. I knew it wouldn't be a great place for him. So so he's always been home eded.
And home ed looks different for everybody, right? I know, like, different people take different approaches, and like I think that a lot of home ed families, a lot of people who aren't home eders think that home ed looks like what we did in lockdown when we homeschooled, and that's not really what home ed looks like for a lot of people. But your approach is kind of, will you talk about that? It's a bit of an unschooled approach. What does that look like?
Yeah, so for us, and even so even amongst the home ed community, it looks very different for each child. And I like to just think that everyone does whatever is right for their own child, and so we use more of an unschooling approach, where it's very much more self-led and driven by Mohammed's interest and what he wants to do. And also it gives us a chance to have a very sensory lifestyle, because he needs a lot of movement and physical activity for his life. So he gets we get to do a lot of that as life, and using what his strengths. So I've told him that I'm speaking with you today, and to get his consent to talk about him. And he wants me to let everyone know that he is one of his strengths is so he's very fidgety, to the point that he'll be touching things and it can break and whatnot.
He's super tactile, right?
Yeah.
He's a sensory seeker.
Yeah, with his hands. So he really, with his hands, he is. And so he wants me to show you, and we talk about his neurodivergence and how some of his sensory things are his strengths and his superpower. So he wants me to show you that he's really good at origami, and
he's really good at origami.
Yeah.
This isn't just
a Pegasus that he's made. And
can you hold it right up and like so that people can properly? I mean, like, it's properly.
Yeah. This is this one, and then he's got this dragon. And it's kind of really cool. It's got these coins here, so the coins kind of give it weight. So when it's like standing, the coins hold it down. So this one's a dragon of darkness.
That's amazing.
So this is his. So he wants people to know that even though he's fidgety, that there's a strength in it, and that this is it. It helps him do things like his origami, his tactile skills.
One of the things that when we spoke about, you and I had a conversation, because I've been working with you because you're writing a book, which I'm sure we're not talking about, but I think we had a conversation about fine motor skills, and I shared with you that Theo is a big fan of Lego, and you said to me about Lego and why particularly Lego appeals to neurodivergent kids, and you were talking about that kind of like that.
The proprioception.
Yes.
Because so proprioception, just for anyone who doesn't know, proprioception is that heavy resistive input you get to your muscles and your joints, and it's very grounding and calming and organizing. It's like the magic sense. It's like the answer to nearly everything almost. So and it's so when you're doing Lego, there's that resistance, that resistive sensory feedback of putting the Lego together, and you can kind of feel what your muscles and joints are doing. So a lot of parents will say that, their kids are really great at Lego, but it's hard for them to like hold a pencil, but it's because Lego has that resistance. But if you're holding a pencil, there's not much like resistive sensory feedback you're getting from the pencil to tell your hands what to do. So it's quite organizing. And then I have a friend who her son loves Lego like mad, and compared to even other building kind of toys. And they were just saying how Lego, it fits perfectly together, whereas some other building toys,
it's reliable.
Yeah, it's reliable and consistent. And I've got my son also loves trains and maps and like the schedule of these things. And I'm thinking it's not always reliable because stuff happens with a TFL and whatnot. And but it's also kind of a schedule and a fixed kind of way of
the predictability of it.
Yeah. So I think that there's factors like that relate to Lego as well.
I love how when you talk to parents of neurodivergent kids who have like these what other people might consider quirks, that are like, whether it's the lining up of things or the really intense interest in things like trains or Legos or dinosaur or whatever it might be. It always makes sense when you know why. It makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
And I wish we had more of that, instead of people going, oh, that's weird, isn't it? Like, I wish we had more. It's not weird. It's not weird. We've got a sensory seeking kid who wants proprioception. Lego makes absolute sense.
Yeah. And then laying on the floor to do it as well is very grounding to your body, to be laying on the floor. You're doing the perfect thing for yourself. And I think sometimes kids know what their bodies need as well, and they're choosing what is right for them. And sometimes when, as you're saying, the understanding piece, because that's one of the things I'm really big on, is learning about the information so you understand more, and then you can understand why your child is doing what they're doing, and you can kind of enjoy it and celebrate it, that they know what they need as well. And origami is very similar in that sense. It's not as predictable as Lego, but all the folding and the resistance of folding and squishing and doing with it is lots of proprioceptive feedback from it.
And really creative as a practice as well, isn't it? Origami, you can literally see you're making something happen with just your hands and paper. It's really quite magical.
And and you can do it in so many ways. You can either watch videos now, because there's everything on YouTube, if that's the way that you learn best, or there are books as well. So it's a nice one as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So what do you like? What is your so I want to talk about this, the Unstoppable Parenting series that we've been doing. I want to hold space for parents to say, I really like living in a neurodivergent home because of, and we're not taking away any of the challenges. We know that we have to do life differently, and our families are different, and it's not without its challenges. Like, we're not to play with that down. But would you talk about what you love about living in a neurodivergent home, and particularly sharing a home with a child like Mohammed?
Yeah, and I think because I've had like the pleasure of working with families for 11 years before I had Mohammed, and I always loved the kids I worked with, and I thought they were so amazing and had so many amazing ideas, and I just loved how they knew their bodies, and that some of them are just so deeply intuitive about things and the stuff they come up about life. So when I had Mohammed, yes, some things are difficult, but then he also has those kind of ideas as well, and I love hearing what he says. So even the other day, we were talking about neurodivergence, and he was saying that some people, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, some people talk about diagnosis like it's a bad thing, but it's just something that's different, and different is okay. And I just love hearing the things that he comes up with sometimes, and it takes time for him to have the words to say these things, but when he's in the moment of flow, he just comes up with really, really great things, and I feel like I learn a lot.
The wisdom of that.
The wisdom of children. I just love hearing what they have to say sometimes, and their ideas. I get the best ideas of activities from watching other kids and what they come up with, and I've loved seeing just how even a self-led approach with kids, and it's really difficult because I don't come from a self-led approach, being raised that way. So I have to check in with myself quite a lot, and I go through lots of wobbles as well as a parent. But I love seeing how a self-led approach where it takes children, and even this love of origami, for instance, has taken him to like studying about Japan, and he's been looking into things about space and how they use origami to make stuff for the things that they do in space on the rockets and stuff. And he's downloaded a book on origami math. I think it's called Mathogami or something like that. It's just, I just love seeing how these deep dives go into, actually spread into so many other areas as well. It's just not the typical standard way.
We can learn a lot from how neurodivergent children choose to learn when they are given that choice. Like that learning style of, it's almost like in primary school when you learn by projects. So you learn all about the Egyptians and they crowbar in some maths and some geography. It's kind of like that, but on a much like more nuanced and kind of like broader scale, when you've got children who are taking the lead. And the thing that I really love about when I speak to home ed or unschooling families or self-directed learning or whatever approach they're taking, is that rarely do you have a child or a young person who is on that approach who is not engaged, because it's all on their terms and they're choosing what they're learning about and how they're learning. And I think our challenge as parents is to get out of the way and let them do that. Like, we've got to keep them safe, right? But like the biggest challenge is to fight against that whole, oh, there's an opportunity for us to learn about fractions now and get a piece of paper out, you know, like.
And even with the interest, I have found I've had to stop doing that, because if he's like interested in Japan, I get all the books on Japan and all these crafts and whatnot and things, and put them out there and say, here you go, you like Japan, and you can do all these other things too. And then he'd be like, nope. And
if you got this little voice in the back of your head going, oh, maybe he'll learn Japanese. How impressive would that be?
And my dad speaks Japanese. I'd be like, yeah, you go, speak with my, and you can, yes. But anyways, it didn't go well when I do those things. So now I have to make sure that I don't get too enthusiastic about these interests and deep dives, and kind of let him kind of go.
Because he has quite a demand avoidant profile. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say so. And actually, when he was younger, if I would, like, he wanted to learn piano at one point, and I showed him this YouTube video, and there's this really nice guy called it's a Hoffman Academy. Some people might know of him. And anyways, he has a series of lessons, and I played piano till I was 18. I took lessons quite seriously, and so, I can show you some things. And if anytime I would try and show him how to do something, he was literally start hyperventilating and panting. And it was not only about the piano, it was about several other things too. So I had to quickly learn that I cannot, that approach didn't work for him. And it was, I remember feeling quite almost concerned. I'm like, why is my child hyperventilating just to learn piano, or a little thing on the piano? And those are big moments, learning moments. And to step back, I had to learn a lot myself, and I'm still learning how to do that as well. But just because when you're not raised in the same way, it's really difficult. And then you have society kind of always asking you, how's he going to go to university and stuff? And I'm like, I don't know yet. Myself.
Back off, he's 12. Leave us alone.
Yeah, and I'm like, he's 12. I'm like, we still have 6 years or something, even 8 if he wants, or even more. Or he might just,
or 15 or 20, he can go to
university
wherever he wants.
I'm like, he might just want to do origami all his life or something, right. So I can't remember what the question was and how I got here.
You were saying what you loved about being.
Yes, I love the deep dive interest, and I love hearing the stuff that he comes. And also, he's still really playful, which I really love about. I think our home ed and schooling life has helped him to kind of stay young in that way. And I'm actually so grateful for all the families I worked with before having Mohammed, because I got to see what they went through almost, and learn from that. Because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have known that this kind of approach would have been suitable for him, or it just wouldn't have crossed my mind. So I feel really fortunate to have had all those other parents and kids in my life to learn from, and also to learn it helped me to parent him the the way that he needed to be parented, and I don't think I would have been able to have done it so well. And I've also felt a lot of camaraderie from people I've worked with over the years as well. So
Yeah,
I like the people that I have in my life because of what I do and how our life has turned out.
same.
Yeah.
Same. So I like to kind of give people a little bit of like, if you get to this bit and you're still like, oh, we're going to give you some like, listen to this bit. This is some good advice coming up now. So
Okay.
as a parent who has learned to do things differently, you
Yeah.
know, you've learned to take a child-led approach. You've like really had to challenge your own preconceived ideas about what education might look like and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
What tips would you share with other parents who maybe have children who are not of the regular mold and are maybe like starting to think about, oh God, well, what do we do? Like,
Yeah.
would you share some of your, like, if you're going to give someone a couple of things that, like, if you only think of things like this, think of these things, would you share those?
Yeah. I would like to say first for parents to always listen to their own heart and their own gut instinct. And it's so easy to say. I think that it's true. It's to not to second guess how you're feeling, and if your gut is like niggling you about something, to listen to that, and even to listen to that over what everyone else might be saying to you, because it's actually neuroscience that as when you have a child, you have these neurochemicals in your body that help you connect with your child, and it's all to protect them. So it's kind of science in a way that you have this in you. And I actually wonder if when you have a child that has additional needs, how those neurochemicals are working, if they even like work even more, or because you need them even more. I wonder. So
Oh
yeah,
my goodness, that would be some interesting research, wouldn't it? That would
yeah,
be
because
interesting.
we need to use it longer almost, and
Mhm.
more in a more intense way. So I'm sure there's some kind of brain wiring that probably happens for that to keep ticking for you as a parent. So yeah, so that's my one is for parents to really listen to themselves, and also to know that you are good enough and you are able to help your child. You don't have to drop them off at somebody's place for them to someone else to work on them, because as an occupational therapist, I think I've evolved over the last 26 years now from I started off where parents would drop them off in a clinic that I worked at, and they'd be sitting in a waiting room, and that I wasn't the boss of that place. But that's how it was for a really long time. And then it evolved to I had my own place and my own clinic in my house, and I would want parents to come in and we'd like hang out and work together. And then I've now gone to this online program where I'm working with parents. But I think a lot of parents don't have that. They feel sometimes that they cannot do it, and they have to leave their child with somebody else. But I actually, as an occupational therapist, I learn so much from what parents are telling me. I feel like all I do is I take what parents tell me and I put it together in a nice little package of information, but it's all what they know, and that has driven me to figure out what to help their child with. Does that make sense, what I'm trying
It
to say?
makes total sense. So what you're saying is like, what I think, if it's okay to paraphrase, you're
Yeah,
saying it's okay to trust your gut and, do what you need to do to get yourself
yeah,
into a place where you are confident in doing that.
yeah,
And you give yourself permission to be confident
yeah,
in the power of you know what you're doing here. Like, which is
yeah.
kind of what I know you watched what Carrie and David were saying yesterday. They were saying the same
Uh,
thing. It's
uh,
okay to say you're the expert in your own child. You are,
yeah, yeah,
and yeah, because we are
yeah,
constantly up against that, being told that we're not, and that professionals know better. And what
yeah,
you're actually saying as a professional is actually all the wisdom is there in that household. You're just there to pull it out and
yeah.
to kind of repackage it and give it back to them. I love
Yeah,
that.
and just to support and kind of, I feel like as an occupational therapist, I'm here to tag team with you and to kind of join forces with you, and to kind of just to I look at things in a different perspective a bit, and but I take on all the information. My baseline is from everything that a parent has given me. and we can work together. And parents, once they know the science and the information behind, one, they'll find that yes, they're already doing things and it validates what you're doing, and they come up with the best strategies going forwards based on what they have learned, because they know their child. And also, I guess part two of this is that kids also know themselves as well. And sometimes if we look at what a child is doing, and if they're able to express it to us, they can really tell us a lot about themselves too. And I'm going on another little tangent because I get a bit excited sometimes, but also that kids are always doing their very best that they can. And they're not being lazy, and they're not trying hard enough. They're actually always doing their best with whatever is available to them in that moment. And one thing,
so important.
Yeah. And also, I think that often people talk about, they say, oh, but they can, like, for example, I help kids with writing, but using a no writing way. So is they talk about, oh, but they can write, they have done it before, and they're not doing it today. So just like us adults, our capacity to do things changes if we're like tired or hungry, or if we've gone through something emotional. The same is for kids as well. Their capacity to do things changes, and they're always doing their very best that they can in that moment with whatever is available to them, sensory wise, physically, emotionally. So that's my other thing I go on about a lot.
Oh, it's so important. Thank you for saying it, because I think we so often lose sight of that we are faced with, a list of deficits that our child has. And it's all about how do we, they've done it once, how do we make sure they can do it again? And we forget that, on the one occasion when that happened, lots of stars aligned for that to be possible. And it might never happen again. And that has to be okay. We cannot kind of set a benchmark for it's kind of like, we've just had a PIP assessment this morning for Theo, and it's kind of like we can't set a benchmark for what his life will be like based on his good days. Like, we have to be accepting of the fact that good days we will take, and there will be days when we are nowhere near that benchmark, and that does not mean that he's less valuable as a human being, and it doesn't mean that our kids aren't trying. Kids do well when they can do well, right? Like, oh, thank you for saying that. So important.
And I guess
we did go on. We did go on.
One tiny little thing. No, it's not tiny. It's a big thing. Is I think also in terms of the sensory stuff, is that I've been thinking a lot about this lately. Is that how we often talk about even the sensory things as being like difficulties, or that how they are kind of like they're a problem almost. And I'm almost thinking that a lot of the sensory things, yes, there are challenges you have because of these, like being in loud places or busy places, and maybe you want to go watch football or something. But also at the same time, looking at how some of them are really your strengths, and they drive you to do things, and how they can also be really joyful at the same time. And this is what I'm trying to look at, and also just reframe how, because I've come from I've started being an OT 26 years ago, so I'm evolving as well with the time. So looking at it in a different way, but looking at it both as, yes, it's a joy and how it can be a strength, and at the same time, some things based on what a child is interested in and what's important in their life, you can support and build those skills at the same time. So that's my other thing.
So true. Oh my gosh, you're so wise. So I want to, before we leave, I want to give people a chance to know a little bit about the work that you're doing, because I'm very excited about the work that you're doing. So for those who don't know Munira, Munira is currently writing a book and has an online program specifically to help support families whose children have difficulties, specifically with writing. That's right, isn't it? Can you just talk a little about that? Because this work I just think is so important, and that's why I wanted to talk to you today. One of the reasons.
Yeah, so it's about writing, and it's because when I thought about making an online program, I thought about what do people mostly come to see me for, and it is about writing, and it's never about the writing. for kids. It just looks like that's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's really always about some underlying skills that they need support with. And it starts with either sensory processing skills or motor skills and emotional skills as well. So I look at how to get to the root cause of the writing difficulties, and building the skills from bottom up, starting with sensory processing. And many people think of sensory processing difficulties as often as sensitivities or seeking, and we forget that it also relates to coordination as well. So that's what I look at through the way I help children with writing, is for them to build the underlying skills, so that when they get to writing, is because they have the skills and their passion and their interest has driven them to it on their own. And really looking at, I think the big thing I also look at is the emotional side, and using a kind of a trauma sensitive approach around it, and with the sensory lens. So that's why I call it a no writing way.
Because you don't, like, your no writing way,
yeah,
the children and the families who come through that program, they never pick up a pen, right? Like,
yeah, no, we don't.
I love about the way I teach kids to write, and I don't give them a pen.
Yeah. So I almost think sometimes I'm like, did I choose a good name for this or not? Because it's really it's the reason people come in, but they always find that there's other areas to work on and support instead. And then it's got my my life bias to it, I guess, in the way with child being child-led, and kids' interests, and life kind of getting them to being the driving force. Not
it reminds me of that. Well, we were talking earlier on about that child who just one day decided to let us know that she could read.
Yeah.
Like, no one sat her down and taught her how to read, but she was able to read because she had the self-esteem and the confidence and the other underlying skills.
Yeah.
And none of it is to do with flipping a pen license. None of it is to do with that.
Yeah. And then also some kids, they will want to learn to write at some point. They will say that they want to, because they want to be able to, let's say one child wanted to make a shopping list of things of projects of items they needed from Home Depot or whatever the shop is called, where you get things, tools and stuff for their carpentry kind of projects. And it was important to them. So they wanted to learn to write for that. So sometimes children will want to do it, or for us, we have a list of like things that Mohammed wants to sell for his origami, like the name of the thing and how much it costs. That's what's meaningful for him. And so they may want you to you may need or be able to jump in and show them how to make the letters and stuff, but it will be because they've gotten to the point where they're comfortable and know that they're ready to do it.
Honestly, the work is so important. Tracy says it's so great to hear that there's more to it than pencil grips and practice. 7 years in school practicing and not really any further forward. And that's because it isn't necessarily about the pencil grip, right?
It
might be an issue further down the line, but that's not why a child is not able to write.
And that's why so I do a free workshop every few months, and that it leads up to my full program. I'm honest about. So the first workshop is called Beyond Pencil Grasp, for the same reason that Tracy is talking about, and I share how it is related to it's not about pencil grasp, it's not about writing practice or doing any writing drills. It's about starting all the way from the root cause with the underlying skills of body and spatial awareness, and just feeling comfortable in your body itself first.
Yeah. People are asking about finding you, and we
won't I forgot
too much, but
I got excited talking about it.
You help children and young people of all ages, right? Who
So usually my program, I say, goes up to 13 or 14, because it's quite play based. My Facebook group is called Helping Kids Write.
Right. And we'll make sure that we do all the all the sharing. Jill saying, is it about helping them write or alternatives to writing, such as voice to text?
So
everything, isn't it?
a really good point, because we can work bottom up to develop skills, and then from a top down approach, about keeping all the accommodations and supports in place for them to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do. And it's really because kids' minds, and even us as adults, our minds are often racing like much further ahead than our hands can keep up with. And I think I was this child myself. I even to this day, I like writing things down, but my hands hurt from writing very, very, very quickly. And when I remember learning to type was a real big life changer for me. I'd played piano before that, so it was like so easy for me. And but for finding a way, I think it's just partly is quite normal for kids to have not be able to write down all the things in your head, and that's quite annoying, isn't it? Or frustrating.
Yeah, it really is. Very frustrating.
Yeah,
very frustrating.
We have all the accommodations in place, whether it's like speech to text, having a scribe, someone else writing things down for you, or typing if that's available to you.
I will make sure that we share all of your links. And I think probably, well, almost certainly, we're going to have you come and talk in the Marble Run about that specifically, because we could fill another hour or whatever. I know this because you and I have talked a lot about the things you're writing in the book. So I'm so grateful to you for coming and having this chat, Munira. So much value in here. I think there's, oh, look, someone's very kindly shared your Facebook group in the comments. So I will make sure that,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Facebook user, whoever that is. My community is so awesome. So thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom. And I hope that people listening have really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. I do want them to enjoy it too, but I've been a good use of my time, so I'm happy. It was Helen doing the link. So thank you so much. Stay on. I'm just going to give people a quick heads up of what's happening tomorrow. So tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm being joined by James Hunt. You might be familiar with James. James is the author and content creator at Stories About Autism. He has quite a big social media following. He shares experiences of raising his two autistic kids, Tommy and Jude, who he co-parents with their mum, and he also is a carer for his dad. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, being a man who is the primary caregiver or one of the primary caregivers of neurodivergent kids. So he's with us tomorrow. Come and join us. If you're not already signed up for the mailing list, go up to the top of this video, make sure that you're signed up so you get the replay of today's session. You'll also get an invitation for tomorrow's session, and you'll get an invitation for my workshop on Sunday, which I will talk a little bit more about tomorrow when we wrap up with James. Thanks for joining us again, Munira. I'm so grateful. Enjoy the rest of your day. I will end the stream and you and I will say goodbye offline. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.